It's time to talk about one of my favorite filmmakers in the first movie in his three-colored trilogy. It's Blue from Kryzyztof, Kieslowski. Let's analyze it and see what this movie is about. I'm going to review it, and then I'm going to go into all the rich details of this movie so it opens up the possibilities for you to explore this movie further and to appreciate it better. Coming up next. Blue was released in 1993, and to me this is less of a movie than it is a lyric. In fact, let me talk about the major theme of the movie, which is liberty. As you might know, Kieslowski structured the Three Colors trilogy around the three values of the French Revolution: liberty, equality, and fraternity. And although you can find interviews of Kieslowski downplaying, how closely attached these values are to the Three Colors movies, I think liberty in Blue is all over the place, and I think actually each of the red, white, and blue movies is an extended meditation on these huge ideals and concepts that are still around today. How is Blue about liberty? In part because the plot ends, I think, at the beginning of the movie when there's a car wreck and you see the aftermath of it at least, and then two people die, and then the third person who survives is quote-unquote liberated. And the plot at this point is liberated too, to sort of do whatever it wants. The main character is Julie. She's the one who survived the car wreck, and her daughter and husband die in that car wreck, unfortunately. But as it turns out, and as the movie goes along, she's technically liberated from these relationships. She can, in fact, go do whatever she wants. And she does. She sells all her possessions. Her husband and she are rich, and she decides to move away from their former home and move into a new home. She's free to make new relationships or not make new relationships. She has no job. She has enough money to live freely and do as she pleases. But there's another thing coming up this movie. This is a deep lyrical movie about grief, and Julie's grief, which I think extends throughout the entire movie to the final shot. Thus you have these two concepts or two ideals in tension: liberty and grief, because of the result of the death of loved ones or relatives. Now, how liberated is a person if they're grieving and in their past there is a terrible tragedy? I think the answer is hardly at all. In fact, not at all. That's one of the ironies of the liberty that Julie experiences. Yes, she can go do what she wants, but her past is always there. She's always tied to that terrible tragedy in her past, which she can never erase. Thus, is she really liberated from anything? Or are any of us really liberated from anything given our past and all the really terrible things and the sins we've committed and all the terrible things that have happened in our past? Even if we feel free and free to do what we want, we still have to deal with that. And we might ignore it, but there it still is. Now, liberty in this movie, and you see it through Julie, is connected to a lot of different things. It's not just about the freedom of action or the freedom of choice. It's about emotions, and maybe the freedom to choose emotions, but the question is, can we even choose our emotions, or emotions and desires driving us? And the paradox is, we think as living brains, we can choose what our emotions are. But in fact, look at Julie in this movie, and her emotions sometimes, maybe all the time, control her actions in a way. As well, relationships. Even if you're free from a relationship that in the past, like your husband or your daughter, you might actually want that, and to be bound to that relationship is better than the newfound liberty to go do what you want and not being bound by the, stipulations or boundaries of that relationship. Now, memory is a key part of this movie. There's a counterpoint here where Julie's mother, who seems to have Alzheimer's, has no memory. And at first you think, having no memory of the past, like in the classical sense in mythology of, going through the river Lethe and getting rid of your past, your memories of the past, seems to be a good thing, except, when you see someone with Alzheimer's disease like Julie's mother, that's a sick form of liberation. In fact, memory is very valuable and makes you who you are, gives you your unique identity. So maybe Julie ought not to be liberated by her past. Maybe memory is all important. Now, Julie, for example, there's all kinds of images in this movie, and Kieslowski, as an imagist director, brings up these images that are tied to these themes. One is Julie swimming through the swimming pool. And yes, she's in an open blue swimming pool where she can go wherever she wants. But as you see it, she's bound by the forces that control her. First, she can't go under the water and just stay there forever and kill herself. I guess that would be a form of freedom, but the water keeps her bound there, and if she wants to survive. Second of all, there are boundaries around the pool, as you know. Now, the other image that comes up repeatedly is the bungee cord. You see TV shots of people bungee jumping. It's a wonderful image for the entire movie because Julie, although she's liberated, free falling through space, maybe experiencing some thrills of newfound liberation or freedom, as the bungee jumpers are, she's also bound to the cord that is going to snap her back, which might be a symbol of her memory. Now, actually, if you think about it that way, the cord is a good thing. It's saving her from dying, and although free fall sounds like a wonderful thing, flying through the air like a bird, you know eventually the force of gravity actually controls you. In this case, freedom is an illusion, so she's going to fall on the ground and go splat, and the memory cord that controls her is a good thing. And now you see the color blue throughout, and blue is tied to all these themes of memory and liberty and whether we have control of ourselves or not. Think about the image or symbol of the color blue in general. It means a lot of different things, but two things it clearly means are depression on the one hand. If you've got the blues, you might be depressed or sad, but also blue is a color of serenity, tranquility. Obviously, it's a color of water, as you see in this movie. How do those two things go together? It's ironic or a paradox that blue is at once serenity and depression. Same thing in this movie with the deaths of Julie's husband and daughter. It's liberating, but it bounds her to grief. She's open to do what she wants, but she's controlled by the slave master grief. So blue is, I think, a wonderful color choice here. Obviously, it's part of the French flag and the French Revolution, but it makes a lot of sense for, I think, the liberty theme in this movie. And last, you have a lot of music in this movie. Julie's husband was a composer, but we also hear a hint that maybe she was the one composing his music. He's a famous composer, and he's composing a theme for the unification of Europe. Now, this is really interesting because Kieslowski is always sort of subtly political, and so the unification of Europe is pretty new, especially in the post-communist early 1990s era. So if a nation binds itself to Europe, to the European Union, is it free anymore? Is it better off, liberated, or is it not? And music is the same way. Music is free-flowing and independent. And you feel like you can do whatever you want with music, but you see in this movie notation all over the place. Music bound by the lines of notation on a piece of paper. And those lines indicate, I think, boundaries and sort of control of music. And of course, musicians are self-controlled. So this idea of music being once liberating, bound to, structures and particular rhythms and particular contexts is the same, I think, or very similar to Julie's dilemma. Now, all this is to say that there's really not a lot of plot here, as I've indicated. It's more thematic and imagistic, and you get this riff on the problem of grief and deep grief because, I think we all go through this, and we'll have to deal, as I said, with personal tragedy, great problems in our lives. Maybe it's not the death of a husband and daughter, but it's probably going to be something similar. Illness, becoming impoverished, dealing with hardships that you can't control. Suffering is a part of life. And so I think this movie is talking about the problem of the general human condition where we all suffer to some extent, and yet at times we might feel liberated, or liberty seems like an ideal that we want to achieve. Can we actually achieve it? Does Julie achieve it in this movie? That's what this movie, I think, is partly at least about. Now, I've riffed in this video on liberty because I think the theme comes up over and over. That's not all that this movie is about, though. But I'm going to leave it to you guys to let us know in the comments what you think about this movie. What do you think about the video? But the movie overall, how does it strike you? What did you get out of it? I'm really fascinated because I think Kieslowski is one of the greatest directors ever. Heavily philosophical, but also an enjoyable director to watch. And so I wonder what you all get out of it because I think there's so much here, and we could talk about this movie for hours. Thanks for watching, and please subscribe to my channel for more great movie content. I've got other Kieslowski videos out there on my channel and other videos like this. If you like this video, go find another one. Thanks, and have a great day.